There is a specific second in every person's life, a second that does not announce itself, a second that carries no fanfare, a second that looks, from the outside, completely ordinary. But inside that second, everything shifts. It is the second you stop watching and start doing. It is the second you stop wishing and start working. It is the second you stop being a passenger in your own story and take hold of the wheel. Most people never find that second. They live entire lifetimes waiting for it to arrive on its own. They sit at the window of their existence, watching the world move while they remain perfectly, safely, tragically still. And when someone asks them why they never chase the dream, they point to time, they point to circumstances, they point to bad luck and unfair conditions. But the truth, the uncomfortable, undeniable truth, is that the second was always available to them. Every morning when they woke up, every evening before they slept, every quiet moment between the noise of daily life, the second was there. They simply never chose it. This is not a story about talent. This is not a conversation about intelligence or opportunity or luck. This is a conversation about choice, the choice to act, the choice to move, the choice to push yourself forward, Devon, when every comfortable instinct inside you is screaming to stay exactly where you are, because here is what nobody tells you when you are young. The life you want is not hidden behind a secret. It is not locked behind a door that requires a special key. It is not reserved for a certain type of person born with certain advantages in certain circumstances. The life you want is built, brick by brick, decision by decision, action by action, and the building begins the moment you decide, truly decide, that waiting is no longer an option. So let us begin there. Let us begin at the beginning. Not the beginning of your story, because your story is already in motion. Let us begin at the beginning of the version of your story that actually leads somewhere worth going. Every person reading these words right now has a conversation they have been avoiding. Not with another person, with themselves. It is the conversation that starts with, "I know what I need to do," and ends with, "But I haven't done it." And between those two sentences lives an entire universe of excuses. Beautiful excuses, logical excuses, excuses dressed up in the language of responsibility and wisdom. I am waiting for the right time. I need to learn more before I begin. I will start when things calm down. I just need a little more preparation. These sentences feel mature. They feel like the words of someone who is being careful, someone who is being strategic, someone who understands that timing matters. But underneath the beautiful language, they are still excuses. And excuses have a price. Not a price you pay today. Not even a price you pay this year. The price of excuses is paid slowly, in the currency of unlived potential, in the quiet ache of dreams that never got their chance, in the version of yourself that never got to exist because the version that existed kept finding reasons to wait. This conversation, the honest one, the uncomfortable one, the one where you stop pretending and start admitting, this is where transformation begins. Not in a seminar, not in a book, not in a motivational video. In that quiet moment of honesty where you look at your own reflection and say, I have been waiting long enough. What nobody tells you about starting there is a myth about starting that has stolen more futures than almost anything else in human history. The myth sounds like this. Successful people started when they were ready. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like the kind of thing a mentor would say. But it is completely, entirely, dangerously false. No one who has ever built something meaningful started when they were fully ready. Not a single person. The entrepreneur who built the company you admire started with incomplete knowledge, insufficient funding, and a plan full of holes. The athlete whose performance leaves you breathless started as a beginner who fell more than they stood. The writer whose words move you to tears started with sentences so bad they make you wince. The leader whose vision changed industry started as someone who had never led anything. Every master began as a novice. Every expert began as a student. Every confident person began as someone who was afraid. The difference between them and the people who never started is not that they felt ready. The difference is that they moved anyway. They moved with uncertainty sitting on their shoulders. They moved with doubt whispering in their ear. They moved with fear walking right beside them. And here is the thing about fear. It does not disappear because you think about it long enough. It does not vanish because you feel confident enough. It does not leave because the conditions finally feel right. Fear leaves because you walk through it. And on the other side of that walk is something you cannot get any other way. Experience, confidence, growth. These things are not given. They are earned through movement, through action, through the repeated decision to begin before you feel completely prepared. People talk about action as if it is a single event, a moment of decision, a dramatic leap, a day when everything changes at once. But real action, the kind that builds real lives, is nothing like that. Real action is architectural. It is built the way a great building is built, not in a single afternoon, not through one heroic effort, but through thousands of small decisions made daily over months and years, until something extraordinary stands where nothing used to be. Think about the buildings that have lasted centuries. The ones built to endure, the ones that withstand storms and time and pressure. They were not built quickly. They were not built carelessly. They were built stone by stone, with precision, with patience, with the understanding that what you build today must be able to carry the weight of tomorrow. Your life is no different. Every action you take today is a stone, placed in the foundation of your future. Some days the stone is large. A major decision made, a significant step taken, a difficult conversation had. Some days the stone is small, a single page read, a short workout completed, one email sent that needed to be sent. But every stone matters, every single one. Because it is not the size of any individual stone that determines the strength of the structure. It is the consistency with which stones are laid, day after day, week after week, without stopping, without excuses, without waiting for the perfect stone to appear before you are willing to build. Let us talk about something that most people find either inspiring or depressing, depending on where they are in their journey. Let us talk about compound growth. You have heard this concept applied to money. How a small amount invested consistently over time grows into something far larger than you would expect. How $100 invested monthly becomes tens of thousands over decades. How patience and consistency create outcomes that feel almost magical when you look at them from the beginning, but feel completely logical when you understand the mathematics. The same principle applies to every area of your life. Every single area. Skill compounds, knowledge compounds, discipline compounds, confidence compounds, reputation compounds, health compounds. Every small action you take today is an investment in your future self. And like financial compound growth, the returns are not visible immediately. This is where most people get confused. This is where most people give up. They take action for a week and see no significant result. They maintain their discipline for a month and feel no dramatic transformation. They commit to a habit for 60 days and wonder why their life does not look like the life they imagined it would. And because the return is not immediate, they stop. They withdraw their investment before it has had time to grow, and then they wonder why they never seem to get ahead. The answer is not that the strategy was wrong. The answer is that they stopped before the compound effect had time to work. Here is a truth that will change how you see daily action forever. The results of your consistent effort do not appear gradually over time. They appear suddenly. You work and work and work, and for a long time nothing seems to change. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, everything changes at once. Your skill reaches a threshold, and suddenly you are good at something. Your knowledge reaches a critical mass, and suddenly you understand something. Your discipline reaches a depth, and suddenly good habits feel effortless. Your consistency reaches a point, and suddenly opportunities appear from everywhere. This is not magic. This is not luck. This is the compound effect, doing exactly what it was always going to do. Rewarding the people who stayed in the game long enough to collect on their investment. The question is not whether this works. It works. It has always worked. It will always work. The question is whether you will stay committed long enough to receive what your consistent action has been building for you. So what does this look like in practice? What does it actually mean to take daily action in a way that compounds over time? Let us build this together, not as an abstract concept, but as a real, concrete structure you can begin constructing today. The foundation, your non-negotiables. Every strong structure begins with a foundation that cannot be moved. In the architecture of your daily action, Your foundation is made of non-negotiables. These are the things you do every single day, not most days. Not when you feel like it. Not when circumstances are convenient. Every single day. They are called non-negotiables because they are exactly that. Non-negotiable. Not up for discussion. Not subject to your mood or your schedule or your excuses. Your non-negotiables are the minimum viable version of your best self. They might look like this. 30 minutes of physical movement, no matter what. 1 hour of focused work on your most important goal, no matter what. 10 pages of reading in your field, no matter what. These are not ambitious targets. They are not designed to impress anyone. They are designed to keep you in motion, the days when everything in you wants to stop. Because here is the secret about non-negotiables. On the good days, you will exceed them easily. You will work for 3 hours instead of 1. You will read 50 pages instead of 10. You will move for an hour instead of 30 minutes. But on the hard days, the days when the world feels heavy and your energy is low and motivation is nowhere to be found. On those days, your non-negotiables are the difference between moving forward and standing still. 10 pages read on a hard day is infinitely more valuable than 0 pages read on a day when you talked yourself out of it. Because the person who reads 10 pages on a hard day is building something more important than knowledge. They are building identity. The identity of someone who does not quit. The identity of someone who shows up. The identity of someone whose word to themselves means something. And that identity, compounded over months and years, becomes the foundation of everything. The walls. Your daily disciplines on top of your non-negotiables. You build your daily disciplines. These are the specific practices that move you toward your specific goals. If your goal is to build a business, your daily discipline might be reaching out to 5 potential customers every day. If your goal is to master a skill, your daily discipline might be deliberate practice for a focused, distraction-free block of time every day. If your goal is to improve your health, your daily discipline might be preparing your meals in advance and tracking your nutrition. Every day, the specific disciplines depend on your specific goals, but the principle is universal. Identify the actions that, if done consistently, would inevitably produce the results you want, and then do them consistently, without waiting for inspiration, without requiring perfect conditions, without needing external motivation to begin. The roof. Your weekly review. Every great structure needs a roof. Something that pulls everything together and protects what is built underneath. In your daily action architecture, the roof is your weekly review. Once a week, on the same day, at the same time, you sit down with yourself and you ask 3 questions. Question 1. What did I do this week that moved me forward? Not what did you accomplish? Not what results did you achieve? What did you do? What actions did you take? What decisions did you make? What did you show up for even when you did not feel like showing up? This question builds awareness of your own consistency. It shows you where you are strong. It shows you the patterns of your best days. Question 2. Where did I negotiate with my non-negotiables? This is the honest question, the uncomfortable one. Where did you find an excuse? Where did you let yourself off the hook? Where did you tell yourself a story that made not acting feel reasonable? This question is not about guilt. It is about information. Every time you find an excuse, you learn something about your own resistance. And understanding your resistance, the first step to defeating it. Question 3. What is the single most important action I can take next week? Not the 50 things on your list. Not the complicated strategy you have been planning. The single most important action, the one that, if done, would make everything else easier or unnecessary. This question cuts through the noise. It forces clarity. It reminds you that progress is not about doing everything. It is about doing the right thing with enough consistency and enough intensity to actually move the needle. Before we go further, we need to talk about the enemy. Not an external enemy, not a competitor or a critic or an unfair system. The enemy that matters most lives inside you. It has many names: procrastination, resistance, the voice of doubt, the comfortable lie. But whatever you call it, it functions the same way in every person. It waits. It waits for the moment when you are about to do something that matters. The moment when you are about to take a step that costs you something. The moment when progress is possible but not guaranteed. And in that moment, it speaks, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, reasonably, almost kindly. You are tired. Rest today and start fresh tomorrow. You do not have enough information yet. Learn a little more first. The conditions are not quite right. Wait until they are. What if you try and fail? It is safer to wait until you are sure. These words feel like wisdom. They feel like self-care. They feel like the voice of a friend who is looking out for you. But they are not wisdom. They are not self-care. They are not a friend. They are the voice of a version of you that is more committed to your comfort than to your growth. And here is what that version does not tell you. Every time you listen to it, it gets stronger. Every time you choose comfort over action, the voice of resistance gains more power over you. Every time you negotiate with your own discipline, you teach yourself that negotiation is possible. And once you have taught yourself that discipline is negotiable, you have handed the keys of your future to the part of you that will always choose the easier path. Understanding resistance is not just philosophically interesting. It is practically essential, because you cannot defeat an enemy you do not understand. Resistance operates on a simple but devastatingly effective principle. It makes delay feel rational. It does not say, give up on your dream forever. That would be too obvious. You would reject that immediately. Instead, it says, just wait a little longer. And a little longer becomes a week. And a week becomes a month. And a month becomes a year. And a year becomes a decade. And one day you are standing somewhere completely different from where you wanted to be, wondering how you got so far from the destination you once cared about so deeply. The answer is always the same, one small delay at a time. Resistance also operates by attacking your confidence precisely the moment you need it most. The moment before you begin. Before you start the workout, it tells you that you are too tired. Before you open the project, it tells you that you are not good enough yet. Before you make the call, it tells you that you will probably be rejected. Before you write the first word, it tells you that no one will care what you have to say. Notice the timing. Resistance does not attack after you begin. After you begin, momentum takes over and resistance loses most of its power. Resistance attacks before you begin, in the gap between intention and action, in the space between deciding to do something and actually doing it. This is why the most important moment in your day is not the middle of your work. It is the beginning. It is the moment you sit down at the desk, before you have opened a single file. It is the moment you lace your shoes, before you have taken a single step. It is the moment you pick up the phone, before you have made a single call. That moment, the moment of beginning, is where the battle is won or lost. And the only way to win that battle every single day is to have already decided, before the battle begins, that you will not negotiate. There is a phenomenon that neuroscientists have studied, and that anyone who pays attention to their own behavior can confirm through direct experience. When you have an impulse to do something, a genuine impulse to take action, to make a decision, to begin something important, you have approximately 5 seconds before your brain begins to manufacture reasons not to. 5 seconds, that is the window. In those 5 seconds, your instinct is aligned with your intention, the part of you that knows what you need to do, and the part of you that is ready to do or to briefly pointing in the same direction. After 5 seconds, the analytical mind kicks in. The risk assessment begins. The comfort-seeking mechanism activates. And the parade of reasonable, logical, well-articulated excuses begins its march through your consciousness. This is not weakness. This is not character failure. This is how the human brain is wired. The brain's primary function is not to help you grow. Its primary function is to keep you alive, and the way it keeps you alive is by being deeply suspicious of anything unfamiliar, anything uncertain, anything that carries risk. Action carries risk. Growth carries uncertainty. Beginning something new is inherently unfamiliar, so the brain resists every time for everyone. The people you admire for their decisiveness and their drive, they experience the same resistance you do. The difference is not that they feel no resistance. The difference is that they have learned to move within those 5 seconds, before the resistance has time to build its case. They act on instinct. They move on impulse. They trust the part of themselves that knows before the part of themselves that overthinks has time to take control. This is a skill. It can be practiced. It can be developed. It can become, over time, the default way you operate. But it starts with awareness. The next time you feel the impulse to do something important, notice it, name it, and then move before 5 seconds pass, before the resistance has time to speak, before the comfortable version of yourself convinces the ambitious version of yourself to wait one more day. We need to have an honest conversation about motivation, because motivation is the most misunderstood concept in the entire conversation about personal growth. People treat motivation like it is a fuel, something you need before you can run the engine, something that, if absent, makes action impossible. They say, "I just cannot seem to get motivated. I was motivated for a while, but then it wore off. I need to find something that truly motivates me." And in saying these things, they are describing the experience of waiting for the fuel to arrive before they are willing to turn the key. But here is what nobody tells you about motivation. Motivation is not the fuel. Motivation is the exhaust. It is the byproduct of action, not the prerequisite. When you actually begin the work, take the step, make the move, something happens in your brain and body that feels almost indistinguishable from what most people call motivation. Energy increases, focus sharpens. A sense of purpose emerges. The work begins to feel meaningful and urgent. This is not because you found motivation before you started. This is because action created the state that you were waiting for motivation to create. The sequence you have been taught is wrong. You have been taught motivation, action, results. The actual sequence is action, motivation, more action, better results. This changes everything, because if you wait for motivation to arrive before you act, you may wait forever. But if you act first, even without motivation, even without energy, even without inspiration, the act itself creates what you were waiting for. We have a romantic story about creativity and productivity that is almost entirely false. The story goes like this. Great work is produced by inspired people who feel the creative impulse strongly and act from that place of inspiration, create something extraordinary. The writer sits down when the words are burning inside them. The artist picks up the brush when the vision is clear. The entrepreneur moves when the idea feels undeniable. This story is beautiful. It is also a fiction. Here is what actually happens. The writer sits down every morning at the same time, whether the words are burning or not, whether inspiration is present or absent, whether the previous day's work felt good or terrible. They sit down, they open the document, they write. Some days the words flow and the session is magical. Some days every sentence is a struggle and the work produced feels mediocre at best. But they show up every day without exception, without requiring inspiration as the entry fee. And here is what the story gets wrong. On the days when inspiration was absent, when the work felt forced and the words came slowly, some of the greatest things ever written were produced, because discipline, it turns out, produces more consistently excellent work than inspiration ever could. Inspiration is unreliable. It comes and goes without warning. It cannot be scheduled or predicted or controlled. Discipline is completely reliable. It shows up when you show up. It produces results every single time you apply it. The most productive, most successful, most impactful people in every field are not the most inspired. They are the most disciplined. They have built systems and habits and routineness that do not depend on how they feel to determine whether they will work. They work because it is time to work, not because they feel like it, not because inspiration arrived, because it is time. Here is a perspective on discipline that most people have never considered. Discipline is one of the deepest forms of self-love available to you. Think about what it means to truly love something. When you love something, truly love it, you take care of it, you protect it, you invest in it, you show up for it, even when it is inconvenient, even when other things compete for your attention, even when it would be easier to let it go. This is what parents do for children. This is what devoted people do for relationships. This is what great craftspeople do for their work. Now ask yourself, what does it look like to truly love yourself? Not the comfortable, indulgent version of self-love that tells you to rest when you should work and avoid what is difficult and choose pleasure over growth. The real version, the version that says, I love myself enough to invest in my future. I love myself enough to do the hard thing today. I love myself enough to become the person I am capable of becoming. This version of self-love requires discipline, because discipline is what you practice. When you choose your future self's need, sever your present self's comfort. Every morning you wake up early to work. You are loving the version of yourself who will benefit from what you build. Every time you do the workout you do not feel like doing, you are loving the version of yourself who will live in a stronger, healthier body. Every time you push through resistance and keep going, you are loving the version of yourself who will one day look back and feel proud of what they chose to become. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is not the opposite of joy. Discipline is the bridge between who you are today and who you have the potential to become. And every act of discipline is an act of love for the person you are on your way to being. There is a concept in psychology called identity-based behavior. The idea is simple but profound. The most powerful driver of human behavior is not desire for a specific outcome. It is identity, who you believe yourself to be. When you believe you are someone who exercises, you exercise, not because of willpower, not because of discipline in the traditional sense, but because not exercising would feel like a betrayal of who you fundamentally are. When you believe you are someone who reads, you read. When you believe you are someone who finishes what they start, you finish things. When you believe you are someone who acts rather than waits, you act. Identity shapes behavior more reliably than almost any other force in human psychology. And here is the extraordinary thing. Identity is not fixed. You were not born with a predetermined identity that decides what kind of person you can become. Identity is built, piece by piece, through the accumulation of evidence about who you are and what you do. Every time you act in alignment with who you want to become, you cast a vote for that identity. Every time you follow through on a commitment, you add a piece of evidence that says, I am the kind of person who does what they say. Every time you push through resistance, you add a piece of evidence that says, I am the kind of person who does not quit. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you add a piece of evidence that says, I am the kind of person who invests in their future. And over time, as the evidence accumulates, the identity solidifies. The new identity becomes the default. The disciplined behavior becomes automatic. The daily action becomes not something you have to push yourself to do, but simply who you are. This is the ultimate destination of daily action, not just the external results, though those come too, but the internal transformation. The shift from someone who is trying to be disciplined to someone who is disciplined, from someone who is trying to take action to someone who is by nature and by identity. A person of action, identity does not shift through declaration. You cannot simply decide to be someone different and then immediately become that person. If it were that simple, everyone would reinvent themselves daily. Identity shifts happen through a specific process, and understanding this process gives you a map for deliberately engineering the identity you want to inhabit. Step 1. The decision. It begins with a decision, but not the kind of decision most people make. Most decisions are outcome-focused. I want to lose 30 pounds. I want to make more money. I want to be more successful. These decisions point at a destination, but say nothing about who you need to be to get there. Identity-based decisions are different. They point at a person. I am becoming someone who prioritizes their health. I am becoming someone who builds financial discipline. I am becoming someone who executes on their ideas. This subtle shift in language is not merely semantic. It changes what you are building toward. One decision builds toward a result, the other builds toward an identity. And identities, once built, produce results automatically, while results, if pursued directly, often require constant effort and disappear the moment the effort stops. Step 2. The evidence. Once the decision is made, you begin collecting evidence. Small evidence at first, almost embarrassingly small. The person becoming someone who prioritizes their health might start by drinking 1 glass of water upon waking. The person becoming someone who builds financial discipline might start by tracking every purchase for 1 week. The person becoming someone who executes on their ideas might start by spending 15 minutes each morning on the most important project. These actions are small enough to be undeniable, small enough that the excuses cannot overpower them. small enough that they happen on good days and bad days alike. But each one is a piece of evidence. Each one says to the deep part of you that shapes identity, look, this is who we are becoming. Evidence accumulates. One glass of water becomes a morning routine. 1 week of tracking becomes a financial habit. 15 minutes becomes an hour, not because you forced it, not because you white-knuckled your way through willpower, but because the identity you are building begins to demand more of itself. The identity of a healthy person resists unhealthy choices. The identity of a disciplined person resists lazy behavior. The identity of a person of action resists passivity. This is the compound effect applied to identity. Each piece of evidence makes the next piece of evidence more natural. Each action makes the next action more inevitable. Each day of consistency makes the next day easier than the one before. Step 4. The solidification and then, at some point that is different for everyone, but arrives for everyone who stays the course. The identity solidifies. The behavior is no longer effortful. The discipline is no longer a struggle. The action is no longer something you push yourself to take. It is simply who you are. This is not a destination you arrive at once and stay forever. Identities need maintenance. They need the continued accumulation of consistent evidence. But the effort required to maintain a solidified identity is far less than the effort required to build it. And the life that a solidified identity creates is the life that, from where you stand today, feels like the life you are working toward. Of all the skills you can develop, and there are many, perhaps the most immediately valuable lies the skill of beginning, not finishing, not sustaining, not optimizing. Beginning, because everything else, the finishing, the sustaining, the optimizing, is impossible without a beginning. And beginning is where most people fail, not because they lack ability, not because they lack desire, not because the task is beyond them, but because they have not developed the skill of starting in the absence of ideal conditions. They have not learned how to begin when they do not feel ready, when they do not feel inspired, when they do not feel confident, when the conditions are not quite right and the time is not quite perfect, and the version of themselves that would be ideal for this task seems to be perpetually unavailable. The skill of beginning is the ability to act without waiting for any of those things. It is the ability to say, the conditions will never be perfect. I will never feel completely ready. The ideal version of me exists only on the other side of this action, and then to act immediately, decisively, without further negotiation. The imperfect beginning here is something that will either free you completely or take a while to fully accept. How you begin does not matter. What matters is that you begin. The first draft does not need to be good. It needs to exist. The first workout does not need to be impressive. It needs to happen. The first conversation does not need to be eloquent. It needs to occur. The first attempt at anything's almost always imperfect. Usually significantly imperfect, sometimes embarrassingly imperfect, and this is exactly as it should be. Imperfect beginnings are not failures. They are the first data points in a learning curve that, if you stay on it long enough, leads to mastery. Every master of every skill has a collection of early work that they would rather not show anyone. The musician who moves crowds to Tirsch's recordings of themselves from 10 years ago, that would make you wince. The writer whose prose feels effortless's early drafts from their first years that were anything but. The coach who transforms athletes was once an athlete who made every mistake in the book. The beginning was always imperfect. The beginning was always uncomfortable. The beginning was always exactly what it needed to be. A starting point, not an end point, not a judgment of potential, not a permanent statement about ability. A starting point. The only question that matters at the beginning is not, how good is this? The only question that matters is, did I start? If the answer is yes, you have done the hardest thing. Everything that comes after, the improvement, the refinement, the growth, is simply a matter of continuing what you started, removing the barriers. To beginning, one of the most practical things you can dodo make, beginning easier is to deliberately remove the barriers between you and the start. Barriers come in many forms. Some are physical. The gym bag that needs to be packed the night before. The book left on the other side of the house. The workspace that needs to be set up before work can begin. When the barrier is physical, remove it. Pack the bag the night before. Leave the book on your pillow. Set up the workspace before you go to bed. Make the beginning as frictionless as possible, because friction, no matter how small, gives resistance the time it needs to build a case. If getting to the gym requires finding your shoes and packing your bag and remembering your water bottle, resistance has 3 opportunities to talk you out of going. If your shoes are at the door, your bag is packed, and your water bottle is filled. Resistance has almost nothing to work with. Other barriers are mental, the overwhelming scope of a large project, the paralysis of not knowing where to start, the impossibility of knowing if you are doing it right. When the barrier is mental, shrink the starting point. You do not have to write the whole chapter. Write 1 paragraph. You do not have to complete the whole project. Open the file and read through what you have. You do not have to solve the whole problem. Write down 3 possible approaches. The goal is not to accomplish everything in one session. The goal is to begin. Once you have begun, the momentum of the work itself carries you forward. The barrier was never in the middle of the work. It was always at the beginning. Cross the beginning, and everything else becomes possible. If you could choose one quality to develop above all others, one superpower to carry through every area of your life, choose consistency. Not intelligence, not talent, not charisma, not even discipline in isolation, consistency. Because consistency is the force multiplier that makes everything else work. Moderate talent applied consistently will always outperform extraordinary talent applied occasionally. Average intelligence used consistently will always produce more than exceptional intelligence used sporadically. Good habits practiced consistently will always create better outcomes than perfect habits practiced inconsistently. Consistency is not glamorous. It does not make for exciting stories. Nobody gathers around to hear about the years of quiet, daily, unremarkable effort that preceded the overnight success, but those years exist. For every overnight success you have ever admired, there were years of consistent, unglamorous effort that nobody saw, and that the person doing the work had no guarantee would ever pay off. They did it anyway, every day, even on the days when it felt like it was not working, even on the days when doubt was louder than confidence, even on the days when quitting felt more reasonable than continuing. They showed up, that is consistency, and that is what built everything they achieved. The consistency paradox here is something counterintuitive about consistency. The most consistent people are not the ones with the most motivation. They are not the ones who care the most. They are not the ones who feel the strongest pull toward their goals. The most consistent people are the ones who have learned to make consistency a matter of identity rather than emotion. They do not ask themselves, "Do I feel like being consistent today?" They ask themselves, "Am I the kind of person who is consistent?" And the answer to that question, if they have been building the identity we talked about earlier, is yes. Always yes. Not because they always feel like it. Not because every day is easy. Not because they have some special reserve of willpower that ordinary people lack. But because they have decided, once, definitively, finally, that consistency is not optional for them. It is who they are. And once that decision is made, truly made, at the level of identity rather than intention, consistency becomes not something you have to maintain, but something you simply are. What breaks consistency if consistency is so powerful? And it is, then why do so many people fail to maintain it? What breaks consistency? Several things, but they all share a common root: unrealistic expectations. The most common consistency killer is the gap between what people expect and what actually happens. They expect linear progress. They expect that effort will immediately produce visible results. They expect that discipline will feel good, and that good feelings will motivate continued discipline. But progress is not linear. Results are not immediate. Discipline often feels awful before it feels good. When the expected result does not arrive on schedule, when the scale does not move after 2 weeks of dieting, when the business does not grow after 3 months of effort, when the skill does not improve as fast as hoped, people conclude that the approach is not working, and they stop. But the approach was working. The compound effect was quietly doing exactly what it always does. The investment was being made. The interest was accumulating. They simply stopped before the return appeared. The solution to this consistency killer is not more motivation, it is better expectations. Expect the process to be slow. Expect the results to be invisible at first. Expect the early days to feel like you are working hard for very little in return. And keep going anyway, because the return is coming. It is always coming for the person who keeps going. The all-or-nothing trap, the second major consistency killer, is the belief that consistency means perfection. That if you miss one day, if you skip one workout, if you fail to read one day, if you fall short of your goal on one occasion, then the chain is broken and you have failed. This belief is not just wrong, it is actively harmful, because it means that one imperfect day becomes an excuse to abandon the entire effort. I missed yesterday, so I might as well take the rest of the week off. I ate badly at lunch, so I might as well eat badly at dinner too. I did not practice today, so I might as well not practice tomorrow. This is the all-or-nothing trap, and it destroys more consistency than almost anything else. The truth about consistency is this. Missing one day matters far less than what you do the day after. The person who misses a day and immediately returns loses almost nothing. The person who misses a day and then misses the rest of the week has let one imperfect day become a week of absence. The rule is simple. Never miss twice. One missed day is a blip. 2 missed days is the beginning of a new pattern. If you miss, return immediately, without guilt, without elaborate self-criticism, without making the absence into a bigger story than it needs to be. Simply return. And the consistency you have built will absorb the interruption and continue, as if it barely happened, pushing through the hard days. Let us talk about the hard days, because they are coming. They are always coming. No strategy for daily action would be complete without an honest account of what to do when everything in you wants to stop. Hard days take many forms. Some days are physically hard. You are tired, you are unwell. Your body is asking you to rest. Some days are emotionally hard. Something painful happened. Your mood is low. The world feels heavy. Some days are circumstantially hard. Everything went wrong at once. The day is chaos from the first hour. Some days are internally hard. Doubt is loud. Confidence is absent. The work feels pointless. Every single person who has ever committed to daily action knows these days intimately. And every single person who has ever maintained meaningful consistency over a significant period of time has had to answer the same question on those days. Do I push through, or do I give myself permission to stop? This is not a simple question. And anyone who gives you a simple answer is either not being honest or has not done enough hard things to understand. The honest answer is, it depends. It depends on what kind of hard the day is. It depends on whether the resistance you are feeling, the productive resistance of growth, or the necessary signal of genuine depletion. Learning to tell the difference is one of the most important skills you will ever develop. Productive resistance feels like, I do not feel like doing this. This is uncomfortable. I would rather do something easier right now. Starting this feels difficult. This is the normal experience of growth. This is what it feels like to stretch beyond your comfort zone. This is what it feels like when the work matters. Productive resistance should almost always be pushed through, not because you will not feel it, but because feeling it is a signal that you are doing something important. The presence of resistance is not evidence that you should stop. It is evidence that you are at the edge of your current capability, and the edge is exactly where growth happens. Genuine depletion feels different. It feels like your mind is genuinely foggy, not the fog of reluctance, but the fog of exhaustion that impairs function. It feels like your body is sending genuine distress signals, not the ache of a hard workout, but the pain that signals something that needs attention. It feels like the emotional weight you are carrying is not the productive discomfort of challenging yourself, but the genuine heaviness of something that needs processing or rest. Genuine depletion is a signal to rest, to recover, to give your system what it needs so that tomorrow you can return fully. The skill is learning to distinguish between the two. And the truth is, most of the time, what feels like genuine depletion is actually productive resistance wearing a more convincing costume. Most of the time, the honest answer to, I cannot do this today, you can. You do not want to, but you can, on the hardest days. When you have assessed your resistance honestly and concluded that it is productive rather than genuine, There is a strategy that keeps you in the game without requiring you to perform at your best. It is called the minimum viable effort. The minimum viable effort is the smallest version of your commitment. That still counts as showing up. If your commitment is to write for 1 hour, the minimum viable effort might be to write for 15 minutes. If your commitment is to do a full workout, the minimum viable effort might be to do 10 minutes of movement. If your commitment is to work on your project for a full session, the minimum viable effort might be to open it and do one thing. The minimum viable effort is not where you want to live. It is where you go on the days when the alternative is nothing, because nothing is far more expensive than the minimum viable effort. Nothing tells your identity. We are the kind of people who quit when things are hard. The minimum viable effort tells your identity. We show up. Even on the hard days, even in the smallest possible way, we show up. And often, more often than you would expect, once you begin with the minimum viable effort, the momentum of beginning carries you further than you thought you were capable of going. You started with the intention of doing 15 minutes, and 50 minutes later you are still going because beginning created the energy you did not have before you started. This is not magic. This is the reliable, predictable mechanism of action creating its own fuel. But it only works if you begin. Everything we have talked about so far lives inside a larger context. The context of the long game, because daily action is not a sprint. It is not even a marathon. It is a lifestyle. A way of moving through your life that you choose not once but every morning when you wake up. A commitment not to a specific outcome, but to a way of operating that makes every outcome you care about increasingly possible over time. The long game is not popular. We live in a culture obsessed with immediacy, with quick results, with instant transformation, with before and after stories that compress years of work into a 30-second video. This culture lies to you. It lies about how long things take. It lies about how hard things are. It lies about the linear nature of progress. It lies about the glamour of the journey. The truth about the long game is unglamorous. It is quiet. It is repetitive. It is often unrewarding in the short term. It requires you to trust a process whose results are not yet visible, and to continue that process without the confirmation of visible results. It requires faith, not religious faith, though that is available to those who want it. The specific faith of the long gamies, the faith that consistent effort in the right direction over sufficient time will always produce meaningful results. This faith is not blind. It is evidence-based. Every person who has ever played the long game and stayed in it has seen this principle validated. But it requires staying in it, and staying in it requires choosing every day to continue. The final truth let us end where everything truly begins, not with a grand declaration, not with a final burst of motivational energy, with a truth. Simple, quiet, undeniable. The truth is this: your life is being created right now. Not tomorrow, not in the future when circumstances improve, not when you finally feel ready. Right now, in this moment, by the choices you are making, and the most important choice available to you, in this moment, and in every moment that follows, is whether you will act, whether you will push yourself forward even when it is uncomfortable, whether you will choose growth even when comfort is available, whether you will build the life you want rather than simply wishing for it. That choice is yours. It has always been yours. It will always be yours. And every day that you make it, truly make it, with your whole self and your real effort, you become a little more of the person you were always capable of being. So push yourself, take action every day, and watch what you become.